Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, welcome to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want specifically to express our continuing solidarity with the people, governments and people of Grenada and Jamaica, who are like us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, recovering from the devastation of Hurricane Beryl. I also want to extend to the government and people of the United States of America our solidarity at the time of your disaster as a consequence of Helen, and in particular to the families of the over 200 persons who have died, and especially for the devastation in the western area of North Carolina. Please convey to your people our heartfelt sorrow and for our continuing solidarity. I want to say that this morning's opening ceremony thus far has been quite moving. The speeches and the cultural performances. Darren Andrews is a product of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but his skills were honed in Jamaica at the Edna Manley School. We have sent a number of our young men and women to study there, and they are doing tremendous work here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. His first piece was about love, the greatest of all. There's hope, and there is faith, but there is love. That ever-fixed mark that looks in tempests and is never shaken. We must never forget that. It looks in tempests and is never shaken, an ever-fixed mark. And our faith, mercies are renewed every day. We heard the pastor. Morning by morning, new mercies we see. All that we need, thy hand has provided. Great is thy faithfulness. And the faith is defined in express Pauline terms. It is the substance of that which we hope for and the things which we have not yet seen. Our theme this week addresses the issue of climate-smart agriculture and for a sustainable future. And while we are addressing the future, across the citadels of metropolitan countries, there appears to be a lack of a sufficient recognition that of all time, only the future is ours to desecrate. The present is the past, and the past, our fathers' mischiefs, not the mothers, our fathers' mischiefs. We hear that some people want to look forward to the past. A past which never was, which is illusory, and which is bound to end in grief, if that is your future. Because their future is already behind them. And if that is what they look forward to, nothing can happen but disaster. And we have seen that occurring with wars. And we have seen that occurring with irresponsibility by human beings in the age of the Anthropocene, the age of rampaging climate change. And if we don't alter our patterns of consumption, our modes of production, our ways of living, of our lives, this Mother Earth, all of us, we are going to hell in a handbasket. This is not something which is an abstraction. This is something which the scientists have shown to us. Science is not astrology. There are some who deny climate change. Those who deny climate change are the very ones who embrace astrology. It's a peculiar phenomenon. Now, we have to stay 1.5 to be alive. We have to keep our average temperatures on Mother Earth no higher than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. We are already on target to be beyond that by 2030. And if we do not change, if we do not alter the way in which we live and work and produce, by 2050, you're going to be at 2 degrees, I said you, because do I intend to live as long as Isaac, son of Abraham, for 110 years? I may not make it. My intention may not be actualized. But the children, the young people, will find that the world as we know it in the period of the Holocene, which we have come out of, which has been the best period in human civilization in the many thousands of years before the 1950s. If we reach at that stage, the island and seaboard civilizations will go to the rack. That is what is before us. And this, climate-smart agriculture for a sustainable future, this is part of what we have to do. It's only part. Because we have to end the wars, and we have to address the existential challenge of humanity, that of man-made climate change. Now, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is among the most vulnerable countries on the face of the earth. We in our government have developed an extraordinary expertise in dealing with natural disasters. We have been in office for nearly 24 years, continuously. I know what you're thinking. We have highly competitive elections. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it's not like some other countries I'm told about in the world where you know the results before the elections are held. Not here. We prefer it this way. We prefer it this way. We love it this way. We love the suspense. And since the dawn of the 21st century, we have had 12 significant natural disasters, including in 2021, 21 volcanic eruptions in April of that year. And every time, we have to pick ourselves back up. We are resilient. The second song played by Darren Andrews about perseverance. It's about self-mastery. It's about an unconquerable spirit. Whatever the travails, whatever the difficulties, are the same themes raised in the poetry of William Ernest Henley in the late 19th century, and which kept Nelson Mandela's spirit alive in Robben Island. It's a different context, but it is the same condition of the human spirit. This last one, Beryl, has caused economic damage amounting to some $300 million US. The loss is more than that. As Soboto told you, our agriculture has been wrecked, or fishing. We have to repair or build over 5,000 homes, 5,000 houses. Already, without any help from anybody to repair any house, we have already repaired over 1,200. We are dealing with levels 1 and 2. We have to do the rebuilding of levels 3 and 4. We have to deal with our water systems, our electricity. And here we are, just over 90 days after, holding an important regional conference. Our schools are damaged, our police stations, our clinics. And as I speak to you today, all our children have been at school either on time on September the 2nd or within 1 or 2 weeks after September the 2nd. Now, sustainable future is within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them. We assessed them last year at the United Nations. We signed on to them in September 2015, that by 2030, we would have more or less achieved the targets following upon the actions in respect of the Sustainable Development Goals. But on our assessment last year at the United Nations, we concluded that because of climate change and war, we would not meet 2030. So the deadline goes a little further down the road. Goal 17 says that the developed and developing countries must build efficacious partnerships for the achievement of the other 16 which went before. To build efficacious partnerships. Well, let's talk about that. Climate financing. Because that's part of the efficacious partnership. Oh, I do appreciate, don't get me wrong, when we have a disaster and there's relief, that we get a $200,000 to help us to provide some food, to put the persons in shelters, to make sure that we keep body and soul together. Yes, we appreciate that. And I understand the importance of the widow's mite. But then the headlines move on. And you're on your own. And you have to borrow money. And you have to choose between DEBT or DEATH. Those are the choices which facing us. And then when you choose not to have death, DEATH, but DEBT, the oracles from the IMF come and tell you that your debt to GDP ratio is too high, and then you have to go on austerity, meaning to tighten your belt. When the developed countries have already caused you to tighten your belt because of the extent of the irresponsible emission of greenhouse gases. These are the things which we face when we are talking about climate smart agriculture. You know, many years ago, as you know, I've been around a long, long time. Long time. Some people feel that I've been around so long that I was sitting and having breakfast with Isaac in the presence of Father Abraham. But I remember going to a meeting of Latin American and Caribbean countries in Europe. I'm trying to recall whether it was Brussels or Madrid. And a very important leader in Europe, no longer in government, I was at a table having lunch. It was in Madrid. You were there with me, Sabi? Yes. And I was told, when I raised this issue of climate change financing, I began by saying, look, in Copenhagen in 2009, you said that you will provide, by 2020, $100 billion US for developing countries per year. It's a small sum. But I say, 2020 has come, and 2020 has gone, and I ain't see 1 cent yet at the 100 billion. And the leader said to me, Prime Minister, when these grand promises are made, you should not believe them, because they were not made with an intention for you to believe them. What I suggest is that you should focus on some lower-hanging fruit, not the fruit high up. The low-hanging ones where you can just stand up and pick, you know. The mango them, which hang, the low one them, you know, the mango and the Otaiti apple, what we call plum rose. Those are the ones you must go for. And then we see it took us a long time to get to a loss and damage fund. Then in Sharm el-Sheikh 2 years ago, the fund was set up after a lot of struggle. And it was hailed as a great accomplishment. But the fund which was set up, the loss and damage fund was an oxymoron, because a fund without money is not a fund. And then this oxymoron was actualized last year in Dubai at the succeeding COP. But up to today, the amount of money in the loss and damage fund couldn't deal with the hurricane in 2017 in Dominica. Just one. And then there are the debt suspension clauses. Oh, yes, to be sure. You know, you have a debt suspension clause that during the time you have a disaster, you postpone the payment of your debt. You don't pay your interest, you don't pay your principal for the period, a year or 2 years. Well, the truth about it, for most of us in the Caribbean, that's really small monies. In any case, all you do, you just postpone the payment. There's no relief. And then Mia Motley, who has done an amazing job on this issue of financing climate change in CARICOM, and CARICOM has endorsed the Bridgestone Initiative 3.0. But what is the situation there? Almost every single institution, the World Bank, the IMF, the Inter-American Development Bank, everybody, governments, they say, yes, these are splendid proposals. They pay lip service to them, genuflect to them, like those of us who are not so good Catholics who go inside of the church, the cathedral, and make the sign of the cross. But our hearts are not necessarily pure. We do the genuflection, but we don't really mean a lot of it. We don't think a great deal of it. So there is some genuflection to these. And they proceed to delay and even to rob the progressive elements of Bridgetown 3.0 of its progressive content. And we have to be very careful in the Caribbean, and particularly those who are involved in climate change negotiations. When you're working on something and there's a little movement, you begin to tell your people and you convince your leaders to go and beat their chests on television and in Parliament and say what immense progress has been made. All they're doing us is send the fool a little further. You better believe that. Because I haven't seen the money. You are my neighbor in any of these countries, anywhere in the world. And a noxious substance leaves my premises, go into yours, or my water run off from my premises into yours. I create a nuisance. You can take me and put me inside of the civil courts in our own jurisdiction and get compensation from the neighbor who has despoiled your land. But in this one, you can despoil our lands, our seas, and we don't have any recourse anywhere except to come pleading and begging. Pleading and begging, and you voluntarily may offer a promise which you do not intend to fulfill. I must take the low-hanging fruit, whatever they are. So they want us to take the low-hanging fruit out of Bridgetown 3.0, for example. It is said that the proposal is that we have the unused portion of the special drawing rights of developed countries or emerging economies, the unused portions, and put them into a sustainable resilience fund. Well, the first thing is to convince governments to put a significant portion of their unused SDRs in the fund, and that is not happening. And secondly, they say if you put it in a fund, whatever you put in a fund, the IMF must manage it, and you must go on an IMF program. Look, maybe I've been around too long. Because I am putting this thing to our country, our region, in stark terms. Maybe they feel that I might be around too long because I've seen so many tricks. I've seen so much deception. I've seen so much hypocrisy that you want to say done with that. You're not having any conversation with them anymore. Unfortunately, you can't come off because the only solution is for us to work together in the multilateral space that devised by the United Nations and the agencies of the United Nations. But in dealing with climate, smart agriculture, it's going to cost a lot of money in order to make us competitive. You can do the climate smart, but it can be so expensive for you that you can't compete in the marketplace. The professionals who are here know what I'm talking about. You can do the climate smart, you know. The technology is available. But having produced the climate smart agriculture, what are you going to do with it? You have to get support up front with certain capital costs to help you to deal with climate smart agriculture. And that can only come from developed countries or from the major international financial institutions. And we have to get that money either as grant or in very generous terms. And what happens in our parliamentary democracies is this. When I speak like this, or any prime minister in the region who speaks like this, the opposition takes an anti-national opportunistic line and say, you see, they say the whole place would go to hell in a handbasket, therefore move them so that you can't go, as though they're going to make any difference to the complex problems that I'm talking about. Governments can't walk on water, you know. It doesn't matter who is in charge. You remember in the book of Matthew, when Peter and his team were at sea, and they saw a man walking on water, and they thought was a spirit, was a ghost. Until he got close to them, only Christ could walk on water. I can't walk on water. Sabi can't walk on water. Mia can't walk on water. And none of those who want to replace us could walk on water. Because the real world is where it is. They gave me a speech, you know, but... but I ain't bothered with it. I ain't bothered with it. Today's not a day. Today's a day of prayer and a day of honesty. So we have to speak the truth. We have to speak the truth. We have to speak the truth. I see my dear sister Sullivan is smiling because I know you know what I'm saying is true. You know what I'm saying is true. No. We have to realize our strengths and our weaknesses, our possibilities and our limitations. And we have to address some things nearer home. I've addressed some wider ones, which are critical. The farmers who are inside here and the farm workers know. We are not going to have agriculture sustainable in any form unless we have a workforce which is trained, which can use applied science and technology, can be modern, and agricultural workers who only want to work in the shade. The only agricultural work what you can do in the shade is if you have greenhouses and you put a shade over the greenhouse. But agricultural work has to be done in the field. And we have to pay our workers well. But we cannot have a situation in which people don't want to work in agriculture. Or those who go to work in agriculture want to give you 3 hours for the day. The farmers are here. So that is something which I'm hoping, while you are addressing some of the larger issues, that we address some which are near to home. And then, whilst we spend a lot of money building a lot of ports, a lot of seaports, but we don't have any vessels to transport the food from Guyana to St. Vincent, from St. Vincent to Antigua, from Dominica to Tortola. We don't have the boats sufficiently to move the stuff even from St. Vincent to Barbados, which is 100 miles away. Our governments and the head of CARICOM, the Secretary General of CARICOM is here. We know this. I've been asking for a long time for us to examine, while we are looking at fast ferries and the like, to examine the question of leasing or purchasing a couple of cargo ships for us to run them alone with as governments or in conjunction with the private sector to move food. When we have storms here and we have a problem with food, we must be able to get an abundance of it easily from Guyana or from Caroni in Trinidad or from Dominica, from Jamaica, from Belize, Central America. There's a young man just at the time, just after the First World War, called Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who established the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and part of it was the Black Star Line. He had two ocean-going cargo vessels, you know. Of course, it's a different environment then than now. And the white people in the United States of America, not all of them, but some of them thought he was an uppity black man to think he can get involved in a business like this. And they shaft him. You know? And the entity which evolved into the FBI trumped up some charges against him. And he was jailed. Thankfully, President Coolidge, a decent man when it came to that particular issue, let Garvey out of jail for a short period of time after he served a certain number of years. But a young man who wasn't 40 years old, a young man who I don't even think was beyond 30, was able to start the Black Star Line with two ships. And we are independent since 1962. And we can't lease 2, 3, 4 ships to carry our produce here and there. We must be able to do something about this. So there are many things which we ourselves have to attend to. I don't want to make it appear that if we get the money to do all of this, because it is just and fair that we get it, that everything is going to be splendid. We have to do things ourselves. We have to be better organized. We have to have our internal marketing arrangements. We have to make sure that the roads going to the farm, but those roads also, we need resources to fix them. Look, in the world today, there are 92 countries which are either small island developing states, 39 of us, or those which are least developed countries, or landlocked developed countries. Of the 193 countries in the United Nations, there are 92 of us. We need special attention. Because if we do not get the special attention, you're going to have the problems which are existing in the world today. Today in Sudan, there are 23 million people who are refugees. The worst refugee crisis in the world. There are landlocked states in Africa which are having problems. Least developed countries, other parts of the world, ravaged by conflict and war. And when that happens, I have no problem with it being said that the main contradiction in the world today is between democracy and autocracy. We run a democracy, so naturally I prefer democracy to an autocracy. But the truth, if the truth be told, the main contradiction in the world today has been and is today who gets what, when, where, and how. Who owns, control the means of production, distribution, and exchange. And wars and conflicts are fought a lot over these things. And when things happen elsewhere, there's a tribal war in Ukraine between Slavic peoples, and we suffer price increases. We see that there's a problem in the Middle East. There's a disruption of supply chain problems. We are one world. We have to do some large things right in the multilateral space. We have to do things within our region, as CARICOM is trying to do, and we have to do things locally. You know, the Hebrew people in the book of Ecclesiastes taught us something. Whosoever watcheth the rain would not sow, and whosoever watcheth the wind will not reap. We have to. And it says you have to try something in the morning, and you try something else in the evening. You don't know which one will work, whether this one in the morning or this one in the evening, or whether both of them will work. And we have to function. This is ancient wisdom from the Hebrew people. Look, the world which we have it is ravaged with problems and challenges. The only way we can solve these things is we have to talk to one another, and we have to reach at a particular level of understanding and apply our hearts to wisdom to come to solve these problems. In our hemisphere, the Americans are here, the Cubans and the Venezuelans are here. We have to talk. We have to sort out these challenges that we have. The weaponizing of the American dollar and the banking system affects St. Vincent and the Grenadines directly, adversely. I can't get vessels to come from there. I can't trade within the framework of the Petro-Carib agreement. Can't sell them any produce. They can't sell us any produce. Cuba has tremendous agricultural potential, as we have seen. They're part of the Caribbean. Venezuela is washed by the Caribbean Sea. Venezuela and Cuba can never be a challenge from a security perspective to the United States. These 20th century problems, we must let them go by us in the 21st century. And we must not allow presidential politics of South Florida to consume us in our attitude to Cuba or Venezuela. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are friends of all. And we strive for a better world. We have seen a conflict arising between Venezuela and Guyana. We have set a framework for discussion through the Argyle Declaration. Venezuela is a more powerful country militarily than Guyana. But Venezuela is committed in the Argyle Declaration not to use force. So to Guyana, if Venezuela uses force against Guyana, you will find my voice among the major voices in the region to say that is wrong, because we promised one another we will not do that. We will sort it out. We will talk to one another. We're having a discussion today, a week, about climate smart agriculture for a sustainable future. It's about that, but it is about more than that. I welcome you again. I thank you and have a wonderful time.